Hello and welcome to this video demonstrating the preparation of the cost of goods manufactured schedule. On your screen, you'll see the data which you should have on your handout. If you don't have a handout, you can pause this video and take a screenshot and print out the data, or you can just work from the screen. Okay, so recall that when we do a cost of goods manufactured, what are we looking for? We're looking for direct materials that were used in production, direct labor, all of our manufacturing overhead, and the change in work in process inventory. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is put a heading here. This is Aero Company. And this is our cost of goods manufactured schedule. All right, the first thing we need is our direct materials used in production. And they give us the beginning and ending inventory and our purchases, so we're going to have to make that calculation. So let's start with, let's just put a heading for direct materials. Okay, so we're going to start with direct materials inventory beginning. We're going to add our direct materials purchases. And that's going to give us our subtotal. Sometimes we call that direct materials available for use. So that's going to be equal to this beginning inventory plus our purchases. And then we'll say less direct materials inventory ending. And that will give us our direct materials used in production. Okay, now I'm going to come over here. A handy thing to do, we want to keep track of what we're doing. If you're working by hand, you can just check things off as we use them. For our purposes here, I'm going to highlight the things that we've used already. So we've used beginning and ending direct materials inventory, and we've also used direct materials purchases. So I'm going to highlight those just to remind me that we've used those. Okay, so the next thing we're looking for is direct labor. That's easy, it's just one number. And then we're looking for all of our manufacturing overhead items. Okay, so I'm going to highlight the direct labor so we know we use that. So now we're going to inspect these items down here to decide which ones are overhead. Okay, insurance on the factory. Remember, when we see factory, that's telling us that it's part of our overhead or part of our product costs. So we're going to put insurance on our factory. Depreciation on our factory is also overhead. Highlight those two. Okay, depreciation on executive offices. Okay, remember, anything that's executive offices is going to be a period cost. So let's put period next to that. We're not going to use that in our calculations. Next is indirect labor. Remember, indirect labor, people who are not working on the final product but who are working in the factory. That is part of our overhead. Utilities on our factory, also part of overhead. Okay, so let's highlight those two. Utilities on our executive offices. Again, remember executive offices, not part of our product costs. That's not going into our cost of goods manufactured schedule. So let's just label that period so we know that we're not going to use that. And then our last overhead cost is property taxes on our factory. Okay, so we'll highlight that, and then of course property taxes on our executive offices, same thing, that's a period cost. Okay, we're going to add up all of our overhead costs and put in total manufacturing overhead. Let's sum all these up. Next we're going to add our direct materials used in production, our direct labor, and our manufacturing overhead. Remember, when you add materials, labor, and overhead together, you get your total manufacturing costs. The final thing we need to do here is to take into account the change in our work in process inventory. So we're going to add our beginning work in process inventory. We're just going to get a subtotal here. And then we're going to subtract our ending work in process inventory. I'm going to highlight those last two things so that we see everything has been used. And finally we have cost of goods manufactured. Make sure when you write add and you write less that you go in the right direction. Sometimes students make a mistake and they write less and they add by mistake. So remember, we're going to add our beginning work in process and subtract our ending work in process. All right, so our final number for cost of goods manufactured, $2,028,000. Recall that the cost of goods manufactured acts like purchases in the cost of goods sold calculation. So that will be carried over to your cost of goods sold calculation on your income statement later. Okay, that's our video on cost of goods manufactured. I hope you find it helpful in your studies.